Hi guys. So recently in one of the groups I shared a picture of this demon napkin. So this napkin I bought a set of these napkins at a high-end department store. They were not a discount, it was not a discount store, and they were full price. I liked them a lot. I mean, they're nice durable cotton, they'd last for a long time, they're blank, so they were perfect until I washed them. After I washed them, you can see what I ended up with is some strange shaped trapezoid. Ridiculous. So after that experience, I purchased these last year, if I didn't mention that already. After that experience, I decided I wasn't going to be in this situation again. And like a lot of you, we find ourselves in situations like this often. And it frequently comes up in the groups to wash or not to wash, and the true trains of thought regarding that issue. And I think I often hear or read the main reason people wash is because they don't want any surprises at the end. Well, that may be larger than the school. What we're going to talk about today is fabric. What causes this to happen? How can you see it ahead of time? So if I had paid closer attention in the store, I would have been able to tell that this particular cloth was not cut on the grain. It was cut wonky. What happens in that case, if it's cut off the grain, it pulls diagonally. See all the stretch? That's what happens. Now you can block this, and that will help somewhat, but it won't bring it back completely. So we're going to talk about fabric, ways that you may be able to avoid this problem in the future, how to get something back on grain if in fact it has gone off, or if you notice that your fabric is off, and Karen's favorite thing, how I make my napkins. So after this, I decided no more purchase napkins. I would make them. You can control every aspect of your napkin, from the size, the color, the pattern, you name it. You can control it yourself, and the result, I think you'll agree, is far superior to this. Certainly to this, but probably to many other things that you've seen also. So I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll talk about some fabric mechanics first, because this story starts in fabric mechanics. So we'll talk a little bit about that. That will help us cut our fabric for our beautiful napkins to make sure that you don't end up with a trapezoid napkin, an unusable, ugly trapezoid napkin. No one wants that. So let me turn the camera around and we will begin. All right, guys, so here's my little diagram of fabric mechanics to kind of illustrate what the problem is that we're having and how we can avoid it. So fabric is this is a woven. So when we're talking about woven fabrics, we're talking about the warp, which are the long fabric, the long threads that run lengthwise in line with the parallel to the selvage, and the weft, which goes crosswise. And in between these sections is in the intersections, these threads meet. When they all meet at the beginning of the weaving process, you get what is known as selvage. That's a factory edge, which oftentimes will have the fabric details on it, lot number, dye number, things like that, printed on the selvage. So a 45 degree angle to the warp and the weft gives you your bias. So if we're going selvage to salvage, there's very little stretch. Cross grain, very little stretch. But when we go to the bias, look at that. We have all sorts of stretch. This information is really important in garment construction because, you know, you don't want the seat of your pants to have zero stretch, right? Or likewise, you don't want your waistband to have, well, some of us do, but typically you don't. In dress apparel for sure. You don't want it to have tons of stretch so that it becomes misshapen. Okay, so enough about that. I deconstructed part of this napkin and we could never have gotten luckier. So there's obviously 4 seams here. And the first seam I decided to pick, I got the selvage end. So what makes that a dream come true is that we can see, let me make sure the camera is picking this up. Oh, sorry. Picking this up for you. We can very easily and quickly see that this particular piece of fabric was in fact, this is the selvage right here, was in fact not cut on grain. If it had been cut on grain, it would have been cut at a 90 degrees to the selvage, cross grain, or across the weft. So you can see very easily what happened. So when you have a situation like this, when it's laundered, the corners pull, and remember, in that direction, we have the bias. And so that's what happened. Okay. Now, all that to say, this little napkin, I indicated, you know, that they weren't inexpensive napkins, and they did have some nice little features. They did have mitered corners, which is nice, but what does it matter? It doesn't matter if they were made with gold thread. We have a misshapen, awful mess. So now that we understand a little bit about these mechanics, we're going to make sure that we cut our fabric on grain. Now here's another test. I'll show you another test. I'm going to snip this right here. And one of the ways to put something on grain is rip it. Sounds terrible, I know. But now we know that this, in fact, is on grain. So we can see, if we do some thread pulling, here is this is one of our warp right here. Okay, it goes all the way down. We can get several out just to show. Okay, this is now, in fact, truly on grain. So, all right, that's enough about that. Now let's get into the fun part. We'll talk about putting these gorgeous napkins together. Okay, so this is a bolt of 100% cotton. It's nothing special, but we're not going to assume that because it's fresh off the bolt, you can see I have the bolt sitting right next to me. We're not going to assume that it was put on the bolt on grain. Assuming that could be calamity. We do not want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull, excuse me, a piece of our warp out. Remember, the warp are the lengthwise fabrics that run through your piece of fabric. With the weaving process, the warp, the long threads, are what give stability to the piece of fabric, and the weft, you know, over, under, whatever the pattern is, the weft goes crosswise and the warp goes up and down. So we are going to just pick out a little piece. It'll come out relatively easily, and we're just going to pull them and make sure that you really want to just get one. So this is going to, the other way you could do this again is rip it. So we are going to, we don't have to go through all of that because we just want a visual that we are straight of grain. And I can see, I don't know if you can see, let me see if you can. I can see right here the shadow through these little fringes. I can see where it is straight. So right there I am straight on grain. Okay, so now what we want to do is our first measurement for our napkins is 20 inches. So we want to leave ourselves a little teeny bit of extra so we can straighten this edge up, since we just mangled it, pulling the warp out. So we'll give ourselves just a little bit. And you can obviously see that my mat is not large enough. So I'm just going to put a little clip there, and I'm going to get it over into my center of my mat so that I can zip this down with my my rotary cutter. So we want to just make sure that we're good and square when we're doing this. Where did my ruler go? All right. We want to make sure we're good and square. And that looks pretty good to me. And we're going to line up on our mat. There, that looks pretty good to me. Okay. So, okay, got my tape a little bit. Now, we're not going to move our fabric, we're just going to move our mat. And we will, actually we are going to move our fabric a little teeny bit. And line up our fold this time. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now let's get this fold out of our way, because that's all we're going to need for this moment. And I like to fold my end under, my raw edge under, and where's my, I thought I had 2 rubber bands, but maybe I only have 1. Okay, let's get this out of our way. All right. Now we have our 20-inch going one way. Now it'll be easier that we have our bolt out of our way. So we've got our 20 inches here. We want to square that up and get that other end nice. So let's just bring our selvage up to our fold and only concentrate on this right hand side at this point. We're not worried about this other side. We just want our selvage to be lined up. And we're going to flip this over and we will line up our fold. Okay. And get us just a hair over Okay, that should be good. Now to make sure you're square, you can use a square, or you can just sit down here. We're on a line, so I'll make sure my ruler is on a line, the line of my fold, which is even with this line right here, and I just need a little nip. I don't need much. So let's just square this up. Okay. Get all that nastiness to the trash. Okay. Now we have this other side to deal with. And what we will do is now we're going to turn this. Now we need 20 inches in this direction. So now we have our warp going vertically. Our warp is parallel to our fold, and we need 20 inches in this direction. So now let's bring top to bottom up. If you have a small mat like I do, this is how I do it. I'm sure there are a million ways to do this, and some of you might have a way better method than I do. Certainly buying a bigger mat would take care of the problem. Okay. But I have really small sewing room, so I am not interested in doing that. I have a fold here that I'm not going to want, so I want to go over my 0 line because I'm going to take that off also. So here's 20. So, same thing we did before, just line this all up like so. And we're going to roll that right off. Now, you want to give some firm pressure because you're going through 4 layers here. And you don't want to be slipping. Okay. All right. Now, here, all we're going to do is zip that right off. Now, I don't want to, I'm going to turn this mat so that I'm more comfortable. I have a small spinning mat that I adore, but for this project, I don't have that. So, but I don't want to shift my fabric. So, and just zip that off. Now we have our fabric. We have 2 pieces of 20-inch long fabric, 20-inch square fabric, and we have 2 pieces, and it is definitely on grain, and we're not going to have, we don't have to pre-wash this. There's going to be some shrinkage, I will tell you, and let me see if I can actually show you. I have some other napkins, samples here in my bucket. This is a pretty one that has a nice, I don't know if you can see that, but it has a nice decorative trim on it. But this napkin is going to shrink some. So they start off 20 inches, but we have a nice size hem here. And once they're hemmed, let me get these out of the way and I can show you. And you can make them bigger or smaller, whatever you want. But once they're hemmed, we're down to, immediately we're down to about 17 1/4. After you wash them, you can expect them to finish at about 17. But this has been washed, and you can see it's beautiful. So that is that in a nutshell. And now we'll get into the construction of we'll get into the real fun stuff. We're going to get into the construction now.